You guys dreamed big from the beginning.
That used to be my motto.
There's something different about conversations like this. When you sit down with someone who actually lived it, you realize pretty quickly this isn't just history, it's memory. This is a raw, unfiltered conversation I had with Carmen, solo artist, founding member of the Raspberries, and one of the voices that helped define an era. What you're about to see hasn't been polished or perfected, and that's intentional. Because sometimes the real moments live in the imperfections. This is part of a larger story in a feature-length documentary I'm working on called Live at the Agora, about Cleveland, the Agora, and the artists who came through here chasing something bigger. If you like this and want to see more, please like, share, and subscribe. And for now, sit back and enjoy my conversation with Carmen.
You guys dreamed big from the beginning. Like you had like a specific vision, and you dreamed big. And
That used to be my motto. Think big. And sometimes the band would kind of get. We reached a point where we had so many gigs that we actually had to cut down because we were playing 5 nights a week. And at a certain point, my throat couldn't take it anymore. So we started decreasing the number of sets we'd play. And the other thing is you can fall into a trap, and sometimes some of the other guys in the band would be like, well, this is really great. We're like the top dogs and whatever. And I remember we put out Go All the Way, and it started flying up the charts. And they were still talking like, well, we're the best band in town and whatever. And I said, guys, our competition is no longer the bands in Cleveland. Our competition is now Paul McCartney and Elton John and Rod Stewart, and that's the way you have to think, because that's really true. When Jim and I started the band, I had no less than like, let's be the next Beatles, in mind. And I thought, shoot high, and if you get close, not too bad. So, we didn't end up being the Beatles because nobody could be the Beatles, but we did okay.
That's so how you just described that, because from the beginning when we started this, we had some really big visions. There's a bunch of other initiatives we're working on for this project, but as we call it the Agora Legacy Project. And I was telling one of my buddies who's pretty high up in Live Nation, he runs all the Circus of Lay shows, and he was just like, I was telling him this idea, and he was just like, that'll never happen. And I'm like, no, I don't want to, like, you can start big. I mean, dream, like, you can always dial it back.
Think Oscar.
And you'll be surprised with what you can accomplish. And so I think that it really resonates. And I love that it's a local story. And so.
Yeah. I think everybody, in a way, that actually really makes the big time thinks that way. I mean, if you visualize yourself and you're playing to an empty room, then what do you think you're going to get? An empty room. If you picture yourself, I remember at some point in 1973, I think right after I Want to Be With You came out, there was this huge 3-day rock festival in Los Angeles at the LA Coliseum. And there were a ton of acts and whatever. And we had to follow Stevie Wonder doing a 25-minute version of Superstition with a 20-piece band. And we were brave, and we were like, we'll go get them. And we just walked right out there, 75,000 people. And it was like we were playing the Agora.
I know. How old were you in that?
23.
23, wow. What was it like to have such early success? Was that a challenge? Or is that?
Well, it didn't seem early to me. I started playing in bands when I was 15, and before the Raspberries, I was in a band called Cyrus Erie that was a really good band as well. And Cyrus Erie had gone through the terrible producers in New York and recording when we were 18. And so by the time the Raspberries came around, we were 20, 21 years old, and we were seasoned veterans. We'd all been in lots of bands before, and we kind of knew how things worked. And I had the great blessing of being able to deconstruct songs. The earliest band that I played in, one of the guys in the band said, somewhere in an interview, he said, before Eric joined the band, we all just came in and we figured out the chords to a Rolling Stones song, and we all just played the chords. And then Eric came in, and he'd listen to the record all day, and he'd come in and say, well, here's the lead part, and here's the rhythm guitar part, and here's the bass part, and here's the harmonies. And they said it was unbelievable how much better everything sounded. So, I just kind of had that, moved that right into my own songwriting, and I really wrote songs specifically for the band. I mean, Wally Ryson plays a certain way, and Jim Bonfanti plays a certain way, and Dave Smalley plays a certain way, and I knew what voices I had, and I knew how many people we had, so I just wrote songs to play to everybody's strength. And so it was power chords from Wally and wild man drumming from Jim and angelic harmonies from everybody.
It's actually one of my towards the end of the movie because it's kind of in line with this, but because you started off, you come from a musical family, right? I mean, your aunt was
my
Cleveland Orchestra, correct?
Yeah, my dad's sister was the first woman George Zell hired to be in. When he took over the Cleveland Orchestra, he was here for about 5 years, and he didn't want to hire girls, as my aunt used to say. And she switched from violin she was a child prodigy on violin, but there are lots of violin players. So she thought, well, if I play viola, I have a better chance because not many people aspire to be violists. It's an old joke about how do you make sure no one steals your violin? Put it in a viola case. So she switched to viola, and after about a 5-year drought where Zell would not hire any girls, she got the job. And she played in the orchestra for 43 years and retired as their senior member. And I literally grew up at Severance Hall. I went there with her to all the rehearsals. I sometimes got to sit on stage. I'd be hanging from the balcony with one hand. One other time, her roommate was Alice Shallow, the harpist, and harp cases are pretty cool. So I went in there one day and just closed it up, and the whole orchestra came to a grinding stop because they couldn't find me. I said, "Where's Ricky? Where is he?"
Because classical music, that's a big influence. I was
huge.
Interested to learn, like, for something like all by myself, like that, how that was based on. Excuse me,
Rachmaninoff.
Yeah, and so one of the questions I had was, what made you make the jump from, which actually, frankly, reminds me of Lewin from your band. But what made you jump? What made you jump from that to? Because you got into rock and roll early, like when you were in high school, right? Like, what made you catch that bug?
1965. I had been taking classical piano for about 4 or 4.5 years, and I breezed through the first 4 years of classical piano. The first week that I took a lesson, my piano teacher, who was an incredible guy named Bill Kurzban, who later became the dean, assigned me the first piece in this book, and I came back the following week and played him the whole book, and he went, "Oh, okay." So he gave me another book and assigned me the first 2 pieces, and I came back the next week, played him the whole book. So just on sheer talent, I kind of like, first of all, I really wanted to play the piano, and second, I had some kind of talent. So the first 4 years, I was just having fun on a little roller coaster and making leaps and bounds. And then there's this moment in time with piano and probably every other instrument as well, where you can no longer practice for an hour a day and be good. Suddenly the pieces are much, much more difficult, and it's all the black keys, and it's Rachmaninoff. And I actually just read the other day, people talking about Rachmaninoff had huge hands, and almost no one can play a lot of the piano parts that he wrote. And I just, like 2 days ago, read he was double jointed as well. So he could play these parts that no one else could play, and he was a bit of a show off. But anyway, I hit that wall, and where it was like, okay, now if I want to continue on, it's going to be 4 hours a day, because that's what it's going to take. And right at that moment, the Beatles went on Ed Sullivan. And I watched them that one day, and like every other musician that I know that's my age, went, I can do that. I'm going to do that. And that was it. It was just that was the end of my classical music career. And I went out and I think my parents bought me a guitar and a little Ampeg amplifier. And I got a Beatle. I took 2 lessons at the Beecher Brothers music store, which is not far from here. And I had this great guitarist who was like a jazz guy, and he assigned me the first week. He was like, we're going to learn to play Red River Valley on the E string. And I went, no, I want to learn how to play chords like John Lennon. And he said, no, you've got to learn how to play Red River Valley on the E string, 1 string at a time. And I walked out, I bought a Beatle chord book, I went home, I learned all the chords, and I quit guitar lessons. And years later, his name was Bob McGuire, had a trio, and they were playing at Nighttown. And at the end of one of their sets, I went over and said hi to him, and he goes, okay, so you were right. You didn't have to learn Red River Valley on the E string.
Was that transition, a mentor of mine who was learning classical, and he's really good. He says he can't do it much anymore because he doesn't practice, but right. He'll watch like what I sometimes do when I jam with my guitars. He's like, I can't do what you do, even though I'm not, like, my guys that I play with are good, but I'm not. He's like, but I can't jam like that because the classical world taught me to be so like rudiment. Did you find that as a tough transition for you? Or?
I was never into jamming.
No?
All the bands that I hated were jam bands.
Yeah, I hate jam bands too, but there's something about playing with that.
I just, give me Pete Townsend slashing away at his guitar any day, and that's, to me, and an 8-bar solo, that's way better than Jethro Tull or Traffic or Hot Tuna.
When you hear these stories from the people who lived them, you realize this wasn't just history. It was a mindset, a belief that something bigger was possible. In places like the Agora, that's where it all came to life. Conversations like this, they don't just preserve history, they remind us why it mattered in the first place. This is just one piece of a much larger story, a film I'm continuing to work on called Live at the Agora. So, if you've connected with this, there's more coming. And if you want to be part of the journey, like, share, and subscribe. This is Jay Boland, and these are the stories that shaped rock and roll.